Welcome. This is Dr. David D. Schein, and it's this week's Saving America episode. And we've got, as usual, a special show for you this week. And we usually start with In the News. In the news, we've got a couple points we want to make. Unconstitutional proposal to make DC a state. Also, people being paid not to work, causing serious problems for employers as we try and get our economy back on track after the pandemic. Rumor of the week is a little reported executive order by Biden that supposedly is to keep an eye on Russian interference with the American economy and government, and actually is a freeway operation to take over a lot of individual rights. I'll talk some more about that in a minute. And in our Just the Facts session, we've got a fascinating person with us this week, Stephen Connally, who's a big-time baseball fan in addition to being a baseball coach. And he's written a book called The God Bet. And he's betting that God is a Republican. And we'll learn some more about that when we have him in just a few minutes.
Your final answer.
So let's get down to business and take a look at what's in the news this week. So this issue of making DC a state has come around for a long time. They made Elizabeth Holmes Norton a honorary delegate to the Congress, but the founding fathers did not want DC to be a state. They wanted it to be an independent operation. As some of you historians know, it was made up of real estate from several different states, although today it's only bounded by Virginia on the south and west and Maryland on the north and east. And the situation there is that there is a very easy solution, and that is to divide DC basically with the river that runs through it, and to have the southern half of the district be part of the state of Virginia for voting only, and to have the northern half of the district be part of Maryland for voting in federal elections only. This is such a simple solution. Why has it not been introduced? Because the Democrats are a bunch of power crazy folks, and they are looking to get those 2 U.S. senators and 1 congressional representative. That's how small the district is. It would not make up more than 1 congressional district. Again, there's such a more obvious solution to the voting issue, and they're not pursuing it because they anticipate that this would help them maintain power. And the current Democratic Party is all about just maintaining power. So something for all of us to be concerned about, but it is unconstitutional. Presidents Kennedy through Obama have said that it would require a congressional amendment to make the District of Columbia a state. It cannot be done by congressional fiat, as the power crazies are out there trying to do that so they can maintain their power, as the American public are starting to wake up to the fact that this is a bunch of whack jobs that they have elected to the United States Congress and Senate, and they need to get some control over it. And these folks are determined to maintain control, even if they no longer have the support of many Americans. And of course, they never had the support of at least half of the Americans. And so that'll be interesting to see. The other issue I want to talk about in the news this week is the fact that in Florida, McDonald's, at least some locations, have offered to pay people $50 just to show up for a job interview. Why is this happening? Because it's something that Republicans have warned and business experts have warned about, which is if you give people more money to stay home, oh my goodness, they're not going to go to work. Why go to work? Why put on pants and put on shoes when you can sit at home and watch cable television and hang out and eat bonbons or whatever you do if you don't work like some of the rest of us do to pay for the half that are not working. And so this is a very serious problem, and it is reported all over the country that many employers, especially in what are considered low or entry-level jobs, are having. And the solution is simple. Stop supplementing unemployment. Stop paying people not to work. If you're able to work, get your butt in gear and get out and work. If you don't want to work, tough. You better figure out some way to pay your bills, because the rest of us that are still working our butts off are tired of supporting those who are not. We're also tired of seeing the national debt run up at a ludicrous rate. And that's a nonpartisan observation, both during the Trump administration and prior Republican administrations, as well as Democratic administrations. We have run up the national debt, and it's time to stop. It's time for people to take responsibility and to protect our future generations.
Well, the weakest link. Goodbye.
Now let's switch to the rumor of the week. And again, this is something that's in the public, so it's not technically a rumor. It's just that people are not paying attention to it. And it's a very scary piece of action. It's not legislation. It's an executive order from Biden that he signed on, of all things, traditional tax day, April 15th. And I'm going to read a little bit here to make sure we get it straight. This is an executive order on blocking property with respect to specified harmful foreign activities of the government of the Russian Federation. Now, this is not what it seems, because it sounds like this is fairly targeted to say, if the Russian Federation does something against American interests, we're going to investigate it and to fix it. And that makes sense on the surface. However, the executive order is so broad that anybody that the Biden administration deems to be involved in supporting the Russian Federation can then become what is called a deprived person. And there's no court action required. There's no habeas corpus. There's no normal stuff that we American citizens expect. It is just a ridiculous situation where if you become a deprived person, anyone who supports you in any way, and again, I'm going to look at my notes here. Here are some of the things that you can't do to support someone who has been declared arbitrarily a deprived person. Legal representation. Where in American history do we deny people the right to have an attorney? Hosting a website, selling food, giving medical care. None of these things can be done to a deprived person, or the person providing it becomes a deprived person themselves. Folks, this is classic Marxism. It's not disguised. And again, as some of our regular audience knows, is that I grew up during the Cold War, and the only time I heard the word commie is when it was preceded by dirty. Yes, folks, this is just good old dirty commies acting badly. And as I've mentioned from the beginning of the sad, pathetic Biden administration, I don't think Biden is a Marxist. And I don't think he's a very bright guy. He's certainly not mentally competent today, but I don't think he's a Marxist. But the problem is, because of his instability, the folks around him who clearly are power-hungry Marxists are taking full advantage of the situation. And we patriotic Americans must stand up. We must not allow things like this to persist in our economy. The good news is, our judicial system, which has been a little timid for the last few months, I think is going to rise to the challenge over the next few, and that'll be our saving grace until we get to the 2022 election.
Just the facts, ma'am.
And welcome to our guest for Just the Facts, Steve Connally. Steve has a degree in political science from Cal State Long Beach, which sounds like a pretty part of any part of the United States. He resides in Southern California, where he teaches and coaches baseball, and he's a big baseball fanatic. And his blog, I think, primarily caught our attention, called Steve Connally's Brain. And he also has a book out called The God Bet. So we're going to talk about all those things. And let's start off. Tell us about your open letter to the Commissioner of Baseball.
As a big baseball fan, when Commissioner Manfred announced that they were moving the All-Star game from Atlanta because of the so-called voter suppression laws, which are basically just voter ID laws, it really upset me, because it puts us in a tough position as baseball fans. You know, the opponents of asking for ID claim that it's racist, which I think is a very racist idea in itself, because if you're saying a black person is too dumb to get ID, that seems far more racist than asking for ID. And that's the gist of my letter to Commissioner Manfred.
And it's interesting, because when you do polls, and I saw a poll recently that said that both black and white voters support voter ID, that this concept that somehow requiring ID is racist is just bogus. It's not statistically supported by it.
Absolutely. And I point out in my letter, I say that if that's racist, why is it not racist that at your ballparks you require ID to buy beer, you know?
And California, I understand, has delayed the recall of your clown governor because they're verifying every one of 2 million signatures.
They are, although I have just last night I got a update that said that it was going through.
Hey, let's switch gears a little bit on the same topic and tell us about the prank that you did that on voters, speaking of voter ID. That's great. It's a great prank.
I had this idea because I was talking to my dad, and I mean, I was a big Trump supporter. And I was upset because I think, honestly, you can't tell for sure, but I think that the election was stolen, because there were so many states where he was far, far ahead on election night, and then it swung the other way. And the explanation they gave this time is it's because they were counting all these mail-in ballots, which told my dad a mail-in ballot is anonymous. You know, anybody could fill it out, anybody could send it in. To pull a little prank on my dad, I have I drew a picture, and I used crayons, and I drew it just like my niece would draw it. And I stuck it in the mail, and I was hoping that he'd get it and assume that she had made the picture, you know, because that's what the media and the election officials are expecting us to do. Anything they get through the mail is a valid vote filled out by the actual voter. And so I mailed it to my dad, and he opened up the picture, and he was, oh, look at this, look what your niece sent. And yeah, I mean, it was hilarious. And then my little niece came in that night, and that was really funny too, because my dad asks her, what picture? Yeah, she's like, I don't know what's going on.
Well, she's a cute little person and the star of the show. So
absolutely.
you
And
did
she
a good
knows it.
job. Before we run out of time, tell us about the God Bet. And I read the material that you have up there, and I'm especially interested as to who's going to be the judge.
Well, the God Bet is a book. I actually have my copy right here. The God Bet. And it's $1 million wager that God is a Republican. And as we know from the Bible, there will be treasures in heaven. So there are things of value from that verse in Matthew. We know there are things of value. So my bet is $1 million of whatever the equivalent treasures in heaven are, that God is a Republican. The only way we can find out is by asking the source when we get there. So it will have to come straight from God, which side he wanted us to be on. And I think it's pretty obvious because, as I point out in my book, on every issue, God is on the Republican side of the policy.
Well, it seems hard to argue about that when it does seem that the most movement that is out there certainly seems very anti-religious. And of course, a lot of states, you could have massage parlors and liquor stores open, but they had to limit attendance at church. I'm never really was quite clear on that one.
Yeah, I actually started going to a church 45 minutes from me just because they shunned the laws and stayed open. And actually, I think they closed down for a week or two and they said, "What? This is not right." And they opened back up. And so I've been going 45 minutes every day or every Sunday for church. So it's crazy.
That is something else. And I understand, though, that several churches or groups have taken these restrictions to court. And it sounds like the courts have had a change of heart, because I'm seeing a lot of them saying that churches should be open and they can make their own decisions. And I understand California is finally doing well on the COVID situation, as is Texas and some other states. So things are starting to look a lot better.
Yeah, I have a lot of stuff about COVID on Steve Connally's Brain. I actually had one of my articles published in the American Spectator, basically making fun of the hysteria over COVID. Most of the problems have been caused by the government response.
Well, it is a very troubling, incredible waste of government money. And the part earlier in this program, I talked about people being paid not to work.
A lot of people on the left will say that those are the only issues that conservatives care about, that Christians care about. And I point out that on every issue, like I said, God is closer to the Republican position. And on economics, I think they talk about conservatives don't care for the poor like they should. And if you look at studies, conservatives give far more charity than people on the left do. And that's how you measure care for the poor. It's not, the left measures it by taxation, by, they think that they are caring because they want to tax that guy over there to pay money to the poor people. And that's not charitable. That's not loving. That's, you want to take and give it to somebody else. That's actually, as I point out in my book, I have a section called The Left's Hatred of Tenths. They hate the 10th Amendment because that says that powers that aren't given to the federal government should be kept for the states and the people. And things like abortion are not in the Constitution. And they want that to be federally mandated. They don't like taking power from the federal government, but they also hate the 10th commandment, which is thou shalt not covet. And their entire is on wanting to take from somebody else. And how can you not say that is, against what God would want? Their entire economic policy is about covetousness.
Yeah, that's interesting. Very interesting way to present it. And like I said on an earlier segment, we talk about the massive power grab that's going on right now from the Marxist movement. I hate to hear it called progressive, because the original progressive was Teddy Roosevelt. And I don't think these guys have anything in common with Teddy Roosevelt, maybe more in common with Franklin Roosevelt, FDR, but it's pretty tough. Steve, we're out of time for this segment today, but it has been wonderful to meet you. I wish you a good recovery from the fire you experienced. And as you know, we've been there. And I want to thank our audience today and join us again for another episode of Saving America.